My name is Sharon, and I'm giving a presentation tonight on how to help kids when they don't know a word when they're reading. So I'm hoping to give you strategies that apply to readers at all levels, and hopefully you can take away some stuff that's useful for you now and also in the future. As your child grows, their reading needs will change, so hopefully this will help you as we continue. So first, I thought it would be fun to take a little practice at reading some words that may be a little harder. So I just picked out a few words that are kind of less common words. So what I want you to do is just look at, you don't have to actually like say it, I'm not putting anyone on the spot, but if you want to just kind of try to think how you would say that and then what it means. All right, so this is the first word and then I'll tell you. All right, so this is a word, you may have already seen this word, but I just want you to think, if you came on this in text, how would you pronounce it? So, all right, so then I'll tell you. It's,
thank you.
Attenuate is how you would say that. So if we read that in text, attenuate. So if I were a kid and I was looking at that word, I might think it means something like attention, because that looks like the word attention. But it actually means to weaken. All right, so this is a word. And okay, so here comes the next one. So maybe you've seen this word before or not. Okay, and how we pronounce it, it's conflagration. And if I were a kid, I would not know what that word means. So I wouldn't even have a clue.
I'm not a kid and I don't know.
It means fire. Yeah, exactly. Or like a congregation maybe. So a lot of times those aren't, these are words I had to learn for the GRE. So, but this is the last one. Right? So we pronounce it erudite. And you know, if I was a kid looking at this, I might think like rude. I kind of see like a stem of rude in there, someone who's rude. But it actually means to be scholarly. So the point of me doing this is just to show you that reading is not something we master. It's something that we're always going to be working on, especially when it comes to vocabulary. We're never going to know all the words. So it's important to have strategies to decode those words. And also, as readers, we do things so automatically that you may not even realize what kind of, what you're doing when you read text. You may not even realize what's going on because it's so automatic for us because we're mature readers. But for kids, you know, it's not as advanced. And so thinking about how you sounded out these words, how you approach those words, can kind of help you get an insight for what kids are doing when they approach text that they don't know. So when you're at home, kids are going to struggle, you know, there's always going to be words they don't know. When this becomes a problem, here are some of the things you might see at home. A reader will get stuck on words when they're reading. They won't know what to say. They will stop. And you will have to end up, if they're reading out loud, you'll have to actually tell them a lot of the words because they don't know. So they're constantly stopping. They're getting stuck, trying to sound it out, and you end up having to tell them. If a reader is reading very slowly and a lot of time is spent figuring out the words more than usual, that could make it be a problem. And also if they do not understand what they're reading, because you can tell they're taking so long to just figure out the words that it doesn't come together at the end, and you ask them, well, what did you just read, and they can't tell you. It could be a problem that they're spending so much energy on decoding the words that the meaning is getting lost. So if your child is having, has these issues or is having problems that are really interrupting their reading, before we approach those, it really depends what level your reader is reading at. I'm not going to say grade level here because it kind of varies by grade, but basically there are 5 levels of readers that teachers and educators break readers into. So look at these and try to figure out where your child is. The first one is emergent, and that is a child who does not read yet, but is starting to pretend to read, or this would be someone who is not yet in kindergarten or before, so this just starting. And then a beginner reader would be the next stage, and they are just learning the letter names and sounds and not yet reading or just reading very simple text. Once they've learned those letters and sounds, they become a transitional reader and they start putting those into words, and that's when they start reading. And this stage can last a little bit longer, and by the end of it, they're able to decode text at about a third grade. Third or fourth grade is when this age usually ends. And then the last two are intermediate and advanced, and they are reading fluently, focusing more on vocabulary, expanding. They know how to decode words, but it may be multi-syllables or prefixes and suffixes that cause a problem. So how you help a beginner reader and how you help an advanced reader is very different. Beginner readers are going to need a lot more scaffolding, a lot more help. They're going to need a lot more support. Whereas an intermediate or an advanced reader, you're going to want to give less help and show them how to become independent readers, how to figure those things out on their own and use the strategies that they've been learning. The other thing you need to think about is why you're reading this text. Whatever the reason is why you're reading out loud with your child. If you're reading for fun, it's not as critical for them to read every word perfectly. You want to make it a positive experience. That's the most important thing any parent can do, is get reading to be fun for the kid as much as you can. So don't focus on every word right, just focus on making it a positive experience. But if you're reading to learn, or if you're reading for school, reading accurately is more important, or else they're going to not be able to understand what they're reading. And that is the case where you really need to step in and help them when it's needed. So the primary way that we decode text is by sounding it out. Most of you have probably heard that term. This is our primary way of helping kids with reading, is we tell them to sound it out. And that actually means just to pronounce the letter sounds together and to try to say what we know about letter sounds to figure out what the word is. You may have used this with those unfamiliar words that I showed in the beginning, thinking about the sounds they make together. This is important, and every reader needs to learn this, but it is not the only strategy that kids should be using when they have words in the text that they can't read. The reason for that is that not all words follow those basic phonetic rules. There's a lot of exceptions. As we get into more advanced words, that's not always going to be as helpful for kids. In addition, kids really need to have multiple strategies, not just one, when they're reading. If they're focusing too much on phonics, then they're just using that same thing over and over and over. It's not going to help them as much as if they have many things that they use when they read. When we focus just on the sounding out only and not the other ways that we figure out what words are and what they mean, it makes readers think that pronunciation and saying words the right way, that's what reading is. And reading is really much more complex than just saying a word accurately. I can read a word and pronounce it correctly, but it doesn't mean that I know what I've read or that even I'm a good reader. So there's more to reading than just that, so it's important to relay that to our kids. There's actually 3 cueing systems that readers use that we should focus on when we're helping kids with words. And by cueing systems, what I mean is that this is like when you encounter a word that you don't know in a sentence, how you figure out what that word is, there's 3 ways that you will figure that out. And one is by the meaning. And that it means that you use what's been happening in the story, maybe a picture, or just context to figure out what that word means. For example, the sentence here, the little boy blank his bike to school every morning. Does anyone know how you'd fill that in? Leslie? Ride his bike? Okay, and we knew that because we used the context. Bike, what do we do with the bike? We ride a bike, so that's right. I didn't put that in there, but you can use your imagination. Okay, the other one is structural.
But it could be he walked his bike, like people actually walk their bikes,
that's
like up
right.
a hill or something like that,
and I was
right?
thinking like you could do different tenses too.
Right.
But yeah, there is a few choices there.
Okay.
You want to get creative. So structural cues is the second one, and that is the grammar. You don't have to know nouns or verbs to use structural. It's what sounds right to the ear. When we speak English, we know what sounds right. So we can use that grammar that we can hear even if we don't know what it's called. So this sentence, I like to read books. They blank, they teach me new things. Can anyone figure out what the word is? Ryan?
Because?
It's because, you're right. So because is grammatical, it makes sense, and that's what we can kind of hear when we're using grammar there. And the last one is visual. Visual cues, which is not pictures, it's actually the letters, and this is where phonics comes in. This is where we use the letters and their sounds to figure out words. And so this sentence, the blank helps me grow, flowers grow. I put an S there so you can kind of figure it out. It's sun, but you can see that we use some of the clues. I work in kindergarten, and so this is actually from a book we recently read where I said, okay, look at the first letter. What is it? S says, think of something it could be that starts with that sound. So that helps them kind of use the visual cue to figure out what the word is. And they're just starting to use that. So, useful things to help children when they don't know the words. If a mistake doesn't change the meaning, if it's just a little mistake, or if it just changes it a little bit, it's okay. Unless it's, you know, like they're writing in something or something where it's like absolute accuracy is critical. If it doesn't change the meaning, in general, it's okay. If a kid doesn't understand a word, use the whole sentence to help them. Don't just use the word by itself. Help them use all the areas of the context to really get them to say it correctly. And the last one, when you do prompt them, which you give, prompt is like, it means to help them. If you help them, if you give them clues, or if you ask them questions to try to lead them to the right word, only do that 2 or 3 times. And if that doesn't help, then give them the word. You don't want to spend too much time on any one word, because at that point, it doesn't help them. So I gave you a handout, and it says word tax strategies. These are strategies that we teach kids to use and that you can use at home when you are helping kids with reading. Depending on the situation, depending on the word, and depending on what you're reading, you can use different ones. So you can use picture clues to help you. So you might want to say something like, look at the picture. What does the picture show? You might want to tell them to sound out the word. Sound it out. What sounds do those letters make? What sound does this word make? So that can help. Look for chunks in the word, and chunks are just a couple of the letters together. So you might just, sometimes when I'm helping kids, I cover up the parts and just show them like the middle so they can see the word no is in there. Okay, so it has a no, and then that they can kind of help them break up the word into parts. So if they can read a part of the word, a lot of times that can help them figure out the whole word. So we want to teach kids to do this independently. That's really our goal as parents and as teachers, is so that they can do all this without us telling them to. Think about a word that you know. So like if it's a rhyming word, you can look at the context of the rhyming word, and then, you know, if it rhymes with, if it's spelled the same as rain, then it probably sounds the same. So that can help. Reread the sentence, go through again, and see if you can figure it out from the beginning. Continue reading, read on, and then go back and see if going on further helps you figure out what that word should have been. And then use prior knowledge, which simply just means think about what you know about this, about the context of this text of whatever you're reading. So those are strategies you can use with your kid, and think about what will help them when they're figuring out those words. But again, because every kid is unique, you have to kind of find what helps your kid and what helps at their level the most. Pronouncing words and decoding is only half the picture when it comes to reading. We want to, a lot of times we focus on decoding because that's the part we see, that's the part we hear. It's really easy to tell when a kid is reading if they're doing it right or wrong. Comprehension and thinking about it and understanding it is what we don't see. So a lot of times it's easy to focus on, are they saying all the words right, and forget that it's actually about if they understand what they're reading. So when you help kids with reading and if they read out loud to you, you want to focus on both them saying the words right and knowing how to say it, but then also understanding what they've read. And ask them questions. Did you understand? Can you tell me about what you just read? Why do you think they did that? And those are all comprehension strategies that are good to use too. Okay, other things you can do. For a younger reader, you can make sure that they know all their letters and sounds. And you could do this for an older kid too. You could make sure that there aren't any gaps that they understand, and especially with vowels, that they know the right sounds that they make. Practice that with them. And helping build that knowledge will hopefully transfer to reading. You can also encourage your child to write. Writing and reading and listening and spelling, they're all connected. So if you help your child with writing, it will transfer to reading, and it's the same with spelling. And all those things, they're all connected into literacy. So encouraging your child to write will help them with their reading as well. Point out words that are irregular when you read them, that aren't phonetic, like are. We don't pronounce that the way that it looks, and the same with was. And point that out to them so that they can kind of figure out those rules as you read. And then for older kids, you can help them learn affixes, and this is the other handout that I gave you. Affixes are simply prefixes and suffixes. Once your kid knows their letters and sounds, affixes can be a really good tool to help them know words that they haven't. And actually the ones that I gave you, I think there's those are about 80 to 90% of all affixes they will see in text. Almost all of them are just a small amount. There's others, there's hundreds of others, but those aren't used as much. So if they learn those, if they know those, it will help them a lot with their reading, especially once they have to start reading longer words, which is what causes a lot of problems for older readers. When you're reading with your child, it's a good idea to really pay attention to what words they're having difficulty with. And even to to listen to how they're trying to say it. And that can kind of give you clues, like they're always mispronouncing the AI, or it's always words that are more than 3 syllables. And kind of look at it as like a detective and say, what is it that's causing them problems on this word? Looking at that and paying attention to that can really help you kind of focus in on why they're having the difficulty with reading. And kind of pinpoint exactly what they're doing, which is what teachers do. They try to pay attention to the mistakes they're making so that they can help them fix them. And use the words that your child mispronounces or has problems with to help them. So don't just give them lists of words to memorize. If they encounter a word and they don't know it, use that word to help them practice strategies and do other things to figure out what the word would be. And the last thing, practice, practice, practice. The more you read, the easier it is. Just like anything, which we all know, the more you read, the better you get. And so just reading as much as they can will really help them and transfer to reading that they have to do for school and other things. So that is the end. Are there any questions?
I just have a comment, I guess.
Sure.